All right, guys, so we're going to talk about two things today. We're going to talk about factoring perfect cubes and grouping, and then we're going to talk about factoring trinomials themselves. All right, so write this down. Write this down, write this down, write this down, all right? We can talk about difference of perfect squares all day. You guys have A and B, plus, minus, that sort of a thing. There's another pattern that's really helpful for you guys to know, and it's dealing with factoring of perfect cubes. All right, what's a perfect cube? What does that mean? What's a perfect square? Give me an example of a perfect square. Tell me. 4. Okay, 4. Why is 4 a perfect square? Perfect square. Because 2 times 2. So a number times itself is a perfect square. So a perfect cube is a number times itself how many times? 3 times, all right? So if you see that this is a perfect cube, that you have a perfect cube, here is the pattern. If the first term and the second term, I'm going to call them A and B, if they are cubes, then there's a plus sign in the middle. So your first parenthesis is the plus sign, same as what it comes with. And then your trinomial is going to be a squared minus ab plus b squared. If you have perfect cubes and there's a minus sign in the middle, your first binomial is a minus b. Then your trinomial is a squared plus ab plus b squared. Now some of you are like, how come the signs switch like that? I'll show you why. But it's in this first example, x cubed and 125. Are those perfect cubes? Yes. Okay, so you can do this a couple of ways. I'm going to say, okay, oops, wrong color. I'm going to say x cubed is my first term. What's my second term? What's the second term? Okay, negative 125. All right, so your a cubed is x cubed, correct? What is your b cubed? Negative 125, you can look at it that way. You need to know what a and b is. So what is the cube root of a? Cubed, it's a. What is the cubed root of x cubed? X, correct? Cube root of b cubed is b. What's the cube root of negative 125? Negative 5, right? You don't have to do that if you don't want to. If you just want to go and say, okay, what times itself 3 times gives you x cubed, it's x. What times itself 3 times gives you 125, it's 5. That's fine. Just as long as you understand what the terms are. So look at your sign in the middle. That's going to matter. What is your pattern? Which pattern are we going to use? We're going to use this one, yeah? So a minus b, well, x minus 5, correct? And then what is your second, what does your trinomial look like? What's x, what do I write? X squared, what? Plus 5x, what? Plus 25. Do you have to have this minus sign here when you're identifying what your a and b are? Yes or no? No, because you're going to use the pattern and you'll be able to figure it out. Now, how do we check to make sure? Wait, did I do that right? Are my signs right? Should you check? Absolutely. But how do we check? Let's just multiply. What's x times x squared? X cubed. What's x times 5x? Plus 5x squared. What's x times 25? Plus 25x. Negative 5 and x squared is minus 5x squared. Negative 5 and 5x is minus 25x. Negative 5 and 25 is negative 125. Can I combine anything? All right, I have a positive 5x squared and a negative 5x squared. What happens to those? They cancel. I have a positive 25x and a negative 25x. What happens to those? They cancel. What are we left with, guys? X cubed minus 125. Is that what we started with? So just say you get on your factoring quiz and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot the pattern. I forgot what sign goes where. Can you check to make sure that you had your pattern correct? Yes. All right, so let's do a couple. Perfect cubes, yes or no? Yeah. All right, perfect cubes, yeah? Yes or no, guys? Okay, so what pattern am I going to use? I'm going to have a minus b, correct? What is your a term? X. What is your b term? 3. What number of times itself 3 times gives you 27. All right, I'm going to have a minus in the middle here. What are the signs inside my trinomial? Plus. So I have x squared, what? Plus 3x. Then what? Plus 9. And what can I do to make sure? I can multiply it. Just multiply it out and make sure you got it right. All right. What about 2? Are these both perfect cubes? Yes. What times itself 3 times gives you y cubed? Y. What times itself 3 times gives you 8? 2. So my a term is y. My b term is 2, correct? And then what's inside my trinomial? What am I going to write? Y squared plus or minus? Minus 2y. Good. Then what? Plus 4. Good. Very good, guys. Any questions? All right. Let's look at this one. Is this a little bit different? Yes or no? A little bit different? Yes. Okay. What do you notice about x cubed? Is that a perfect cube? Yes. Is 1 a perfect cube? Yes. Is 64 a perfect cube? What number of times itself 3 times gives you 64? So, do you guys agree? This is 4x and this is 1 when we take the cube root of each? Okay, so let's work on our pattern. It's a minus or plus b? Minus the sign in the middle. So it's 4x minus 1. And then it's a squared. What is 4x squared? 16x squared. Good. And then I have 4 times 1, correct? Yes or no? Okay, so 4 times 1, so plus 4x. And then what? Plus 1. There you go. Make sure, guys, when you square this first term, if it is not a single term by itself, that 2 is going to go to both. Yes, sir.
Why is it just regular 4x? Shouldn't it be negative 4x because it's AB?
What's the pattern? No, you don't take the sign of the terms. You have to follow the pattern.
Because it's a times b and b is negative 1, is it?
B is 1. You keep this negative. This negative is going to determine which pattern you use, right? If we multiply this out, let's multiply it out. What's 4x times 16x squared? 64 what? X cubed. What's 4x times 4x? 16x, yeah. What's 4x times 1? Plus 4x. What's negative 1 times x squared? Sorry, negative 1 times 16x squared is negative 16x squared, right? What's negative 1 times 4x? Minus 4x. And then what's negative 1 and 1? Minus 1. So look what happens here. Positive 16x, negative 16x. Positive 4, negative 4. You're left with your 64x squared minus 1.
4x and 4x is 4x.
4x times 4x is 16x squared, yeah? And then 4x times 1 is 4x? Yeah? Okay. No, that's good. No, check me. That's fine. Thanks. All right, look at number 4. How's number 4 a little bit different? 192 is not a perfect cube, is it? But this looks like it should be a perfect cube. Guys, what should we always look for before we do any factoring? It's the first thing. Greatest common factor, GCF. Is there a number that goes into both 3 and 192? Okay. Some of you are like, I don't know if 3 goes into 192. Well, add. What's 1 plus 9? 10. And 10 plus 2 is 12. Does 3 go into 12? Then 3 will go into 192. So let's go ahead and factor out that 3. That 3 comes out in front. Some of you on your test, you factored out the GCF and then it just went away. You cannot do that. It has to stay. So inside here, I'm left with x cubed plus what? 64? 3 goes into 19. 6 times with 1 left over. Good. Now, guys, do you have perfect cubes? Yes. So let's go ahead and do our pattern. What's my a term? X. What's my b term? What times itself 3 times gives me 64? 4. I'm going to have that plus sign in the middle, correct? So my trinomial is going to be a squared minus or plus? Minus a times b plus what? 16. This last is always going to be a plus. How come? Because you're squaring the number. Good. Very good. All right, questions? All right, along. Factor the polynomial. Let's do this quickly. 27 a perfect cube? Yep. X cubed a perfect cube? Yep. 1 a perfect cube? Yes, so my binomial is going to be 3x plus 1. You guys agree? So then my trinomial is going to be what? If I have 3x and I square it, what does that become? Good. 9x squared minus what? 3x, perfect, plus what? Good. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, do I have cubes here? Yes, all right. If you need to write it down, go ahead, guys. What is 64? What's the cube root of 64? 4. Cube root of y is y, right? What's the cube root of 125? 5. Okay, so there, now you can kind of see, okay, here's what I'm looking at. My first binomial is 4y minus 5. Yeah? So then when I have my trinomial, what goes first? 4y squared. What is that? 16. Good. Y squared. Plus or minus? Plus. Very good. What? 20y. Good. Multiply those two together. And then I have what? Plus 25? Okay, perfect. What do you guys think about 7? I think it's like, what? It's the same thing, right? What is the cube root of x plus 2 cubed? It's just x plus 2. What's the cube root of y cubed? It's y. Follow the pattern, guys. You don't have to multiply it out. Just follow the pattern. So my first parenthesis is going to be what? X plus 2, what? Minus y. All right, fine. What goes inside? X plus 2 what? Okay, x plus 2 squared. Then what do? I multiply a times b, correct? So I have what? X plus 2 times what? Y, right? What sign goes there?
Plus.
Perfect. And then what's going to go at the end? Y, what? Squared, perfect. You can leave it like that. You don't have to multiply it all out. If you did, it's fine, but you don't have to. But just because you have letters and binomials and stuff like that, the rules don't change. Figure out what your A term is, figure out what your B term is, and then plug it into the formula. All right, scoot along. We're going to talk today about factoring by grouping, and then we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. When do we group? When there's how many terms? 4. All right, you're going to factor out the GCF. Some of you have been taught some ways to do this. Some of you have been taught others. I'll show you what I do. If you were taught a different way and it works for you, that's perfectly fine. But the first thing we always look for is the what? GCF, okay? Is there a GCF in all 4 of these terms? No. I see that I have 4 terms, so I'm going to group. Notice, ladies and gents, I put that plus sign. That third sign stays in the second parenthesis. Always keep it in there. So now we're just going to take the GCF out of both parentheses. What's the GCF in the first parenthesis? X squared. Good. If I factor out an x squared, what am I left with? X minus what? 1. Perfect. What is the GCF in the second parenthesis? What kind of a 2?
2.
Okay, a positive 2. You don't have to put the plus sign, but I'm going to, just so you guys can see it. And then what am I left with if I divide out a 2? X minus 1. What do you now notice? Both terms, right? This is a term here because terms are separated by plus and minus. Both terms have an x minus 1. So you have discovered the GCF. The GCF is x minus 1. We take the GCF out and write it one time. And then what happens to my leftovers? They get their own parenthesis. And then I check to see if I could factor more. Can I factor x squared plus 2 anymore? No. If it was x squared minus 4, yes, you could. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we factor completely. But when we group, guys, you're going to first 2 terms, second 2 terms. You're going to find the new GCF, write it out front once, leftovers get their own parenthesis. Now, some of you, I know we're taught a different way. That's totally fine. Do what works for you. But what do we look for first? GCF. I'm going to say that every single time, guys. It's very important that you look for that first. Is there a letter and or number that is in all 4 terms? No. So I see 4 terms. I'm going to group. First 2, second two. Focus on the first parenthesis itself. Is there a factor of a number and a letter that they have in common? 2x squared. Agreed. So I'm going to bring out my 2x squared. You can write it underneath here if you need to, just to kind of see. What's 8 divided by 2? 4. X to the 5th divided by x squared is? X cubed. Good. Minus 6 divided by 2? 3. X squared and x squared? Cancel. Yeah? All right. So now you have an idea what your second parenthesis should look like. Correct? It should kind of give you a guide if the numbers are big or you don't see something. But what can you take out of 12x cubed and negative 9? Okay. Let's divide out of 3. When I divide this out, 12 divided by 3 is 4. And I'm left with x cubed. And then 9 divided by 3 is? Do you guys have the same parenthesis? Yes. So we take that out front. We write it one time out in front, just like you would anything else that you take out as a GCF. And then what happens to my leftovers? They get their own parenthesis. And we always check to see, hey, can I factor any more? You can't in this one, but that's what you're looking for. Yeah? All right, moving along. 9. 9's a tad bit different. Pay attention. 4 terms. Is there a GCF? No. So I'm going to take the first 2. And notice, guys, I kept that negative sign right here with a 5, correct? If we lead with a negative ever, we want to take it out. So my first parenthesis, what do I have in common? X squared. I take out that x squared. If you want to write it underneath to give yourself a little hint, that's fine. But x cubed divided by x squared is x. X squared divided by x squared is? So plus 1. Now I want my second parenthesis to say x plus 1. If you lead with a negative, I'm going to say this a million times, take it out. So what can I take out of negative 5x and a negative 5? I'm going to take out a negative 5. When I do that, negative 5 divided by negative 5 is x. What happens when I have negative 5 divided by negative 5? It becomes what? Plus 1. Whenever that third term is a negative, you want to factor out a negative. Make sure you guys do that. So now you see your new GCF is x plus 1. We write it one time out in front. And what happens to my leftovers? They get their own parenthesis. And then we check to see if we could factor more, which you can't. Questions? All right, again, we're going to do this quickly. 4 terms, no GCF, correct? Okay, so take the first 2, second 2, leave that negative inside that parenthesis. What can I take out of the first set of numbers? My first parenthesis. X squared, good. I'm going to take out the x squared. I'm left with x plus 5. What can I take out of negative 5x and minus 25? Negative 5, good. You lead with a negative, take it out. When I divide negative 5 and negative 5, I'm left with x. When I divide negative 25 divided by negative 5, I'm left with what? Positive 5. So what am I going to write out front one time? X plus 5. And then what happens with my leftovers? They get their own home, right? And we check to see if we can factor more. All right, moving along. 4 terms, GCF? No. So I'm going to group the first 2 and the second 2. What do I take out of 3x cubed and x squared? How many x's? Good, x squared. So I'm left with 3x plus 1. Negative 15. If I lead with a negative, what do I take out? A negative. So I'm going to take out a negative 5 here. What's negative 15 divided by negative 5? What kind of, it's 3x, right? And then negative 5 divided by negative 5 is? There you go. Are my 2 parentheses that I took out the same? Yes, so I'm going to write it one time out in front. And then my leftovers get their own home. Questions? You guys okay? We'll say something. I say this in my pre-cal class too. When we go to find the zeros, when you try to find the zeros of a function and that sort of thing, 90% of the time, you have to factor. Factoring is never going away. Never. So if you're not good at factoring, we're going to get good. We're going to practice, because you need to get quick with stuff like this. All right, so the next section, chapter P section 4, is factoring trinomials. What does it mean if something is a trinomial? How many terms does it have? 3 terms. Tri means 3. 3 terms. Now, I don't love you guys memorizing the patterns. I don't love that. It's fine for cubes and stuff like that, but for factoring trinomials, we need to be able to do this using just our brains. There is a pattern to it. You find the factors of the last term that gives you the middle term, and then if the last term is positive, both signs are the same. If the last term is negative, the sign in the middle goes. I just don't love it. If this is how you were taught and that's what you guys know, fine. I like us to use our brains. We're going to factor trinomials 2 different ways. We're going to factor trinomials where a is 1 and where a is not 1. Does anybody have any idea what that means? Where is a? In x squared minus 7x plus 12. Where is your a? It's in front of the x squared. So what we're talking about, 2 different ways to factor. We're going to factor these first group with your a term being 1. That means the number in front of x squared is 1. Now, you can do the same thing every time. And again, some of us were taught to factor differently. If you were taught a certain way, it works in your head perfectly fine with me. But I'm going to do the same thing every time. And if you want to do it that way, great. If you don't want to, that's fine. But here is my a term, 1, correct? What is your b term? -7. And what is your c term? 12, the last one. So every single time we factor a trinomial, we're going to look for the GCF and all that stuff, but you're going to multiply a times c. What is 1 times 12? 12. I want factors of 12 that multiply to give me 12, but add, God bless you, to give me -7. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set up. What goes in front of each parenthesis? Your x. I need factors of 12 that multiply to give you positive 12, but add to give you -7. What are they? -3 and -4. Good. When I multiply 2 negatives, I get a positive. And when I combine those, I get -7. And that's it. Now, you guys can always, always, always check. You can always check. How do you check to make sure that this and this are the exact same thing? You can multiply. You can multiply back out and make sure that you get what your answer is what you started with. Does that make sense? Now, again, I know some of you were taught to do this and you put numbers here and there. Well, that's fine. I like us to use our brains. All right. For the sake of time, I'm not going to ask the same question every time. Tomorrow I will. What is the first thing you need to ask yourself when you're factoring? Is there a GCF? Okay. There's not going to be right now. We're just factoring just trinomials, so I'm not going to keep asking the same question, but tomorrow we're going to have to. But we're going to multiply a times c. So I have 1 times 6. What are the factors of 6 that multiply to give me 6, but add to give me 5? 2 and 3. What are the other factors of 6? 6 and 1, right? So if the sign in the middle is different or something like that, you have to make sure that your pairs that you pull out, your factors, that they make sense. So if this is a little harder for you, that's fine. +3, +2. If you picked 6 and 1, just make sure you check. Foil it back out, and then you'll see, oh, wait, those ones don't work. Does that make sense? Yeah. I didn't take it out. I just multiplied a times c. So 1, in order to factor, you have to find factors of the last number that multiply to give you the last one, but add to give you the middle one. So like in number 2, I have 1 times -6, all right? Signs matter here, guys. -6. What 2 numbers multiply to give me a -6, but add to give me a -1? It's 3 and 2 again, isn't it? But here the signs really do matter. Where does the negative need to go? With the 3, good, and the positive goes here. Now check. What's -3 times +2? -6, good. What's -3 plus 2? -1, good. And again, you can always multiply back out. All right, a times c again. 1 times 8 now. What are the factors of 8? That multiply to give me 8, but add to give me -6. I have 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to say 4 and 2. I agree. What sign's going to go? This is how you guys can think through it. How could I possibly get a positive 8 when I multiply? They both would have to be positive or they both have to be negative, correct? So think about it. I want a positive 8 when I multiply, but a negative 6 when I add, so it's minus minus. Scoot along. Good job. All right, here we go. A times C. 1 times negative 24. So negative 24. I need factors of negative 24. They're going to multiply to give me negative 24, but add to give me negative 5. So I have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 6 and 4. Which one's going to give me a negative 24 when I multiply, but a negative 5 when I add? Look at you guys. Negative 8 plus 3. Perfect. Do a quick check. What's negative 8 times 3? Negative 24. Good. What's negative 8 plus 3? Negative 5. Now, could you have written x plus 3, x minus 8? Yes. But you can't switch the signs. All right. A times C. What are the factors of 1 that multiply to give me 1, but add to give me 1? But, okay, 1 times 1 is 1. Agreed. What's 1 plus 1? 2. So if there was a 2 here, yeah, I'd agree with you. But there's not. Can you factor this? No. You can say not factorable. You can also say prime if you wanted to. This is a quadratic because it's raised to the second power. Does anybody know the formula that you could use if you needed to solve this? Since it's a quadratic. Yep, the quadratic what? Formula. Do you guys know that, right? Or no? No? Okay. That's okay. We'll learn it. All right, here we go. Again, A times C. 1 times negative 18. What is 1 times negative 18? I need my factors that will multiply to give me negative 18, but add to give me a negative 3. I have 1 and 18, 2 and 9. Okay, negative 6 and a positive 3. What's negative 6 times 3? Negative 18. What's negative 6 plus 3? Negative 6. Good. All right, here we go. 1 times 2 is 2. What are the factors of 2 that multiply to give me 2, but add to give me 3? 2 and 1. And what signs? Plus, plus. What's positive 2 times positive 1? 2. What is positive 2 plus positive 1? 3. Perfecto. All right, now we're going to factor where A is not 1. All right, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can use trial and error with the factors of the first term and the last term. You can multiply the first and the last terms, find the factors that that sum to the middle term, replace the middle term with these and factor by grouping. You can do that. That's probably how some of you were taught. Now, again, if you were taught a certain way that you like, go for it. If you like the way I do it, then follow along. I have 2x squared plus x minus 15. We're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. We're going to take A times C. 2, now A is not 1, so it's 2 times negative 15 is what? Negative 30, okay? That's the magic number. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this set up, and I'm going to put x's in the front of each of my parentheses. Just watch before you say, don't you have to have? Just wait a second. Guys, factors of negative 30 that multiply to give me negative 30, but add to give me positive 1. I agree. Plus 6 and minus 5. Now, the way that this is written, are these two things equal? No, because x times x is x squared. Right? So there's one extra step. The way that I do this, instead of finding GCF and trial and error and all that stuff, there's one extra step that you have to do. This is my A term, correct? My A term is not 1. So what you can do is you can take your A term and put it underneath both of the factors you found. What is 6 divided by 2? So this becomes x plus 3. Does 5 divide by 2 nice and pretty? No, so then this becomes the coefficient of the binomial, 2x minus 5. Now these two things are the same. Yes, sir?
Is it possible to put the square root of the A term in the differential?
Say that one more time.
Is it possible to put the square root of the A term in the
No, because I understand what you're saying, like x and then 2x, but if you took the square root of 2x squared, it would actually be like what's the square root of 2? You know, it's not it's not a pretty little number. I see what you're saying by like breaking it up here and here. That'll work every single time. We'll do some more examples. But again, if you were taught to do it a different way, that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna show you how I do it. That way. As long as you guys come out with the same answer and it mathematically makes sense, I'm fine with that. But again, we're gonna go with A times C. 2 times 3 is what? Positive 6, yeah? All right, so we're going to do it Miss Meadows' way. I'm going to go ahead and get it set up. I'm going to put x's in the front. And I'm going to say, what two numbers multiply to give me 6, but add to give me negative 5? What kind of 2, what kind of 3? Negative 2 and negative 3? Okay, I agree. As it's written right now, these two things are not equal. They are not equivalent. What do I have to do? I need to take my A term and put it under both of my factors and divide. Does 3 divide by 2 nice and pretty? No, the 2 is going to become my coefficient here, so 2x minus 3. Does 2 divide by 2 nice and pretty? Yep, so you have x minus 1. Now these things are the same. How can we check? Multiply it out. Okay, again, you always want to look for the GCF to make your numbers smaller, make your life easier. We're not doing that right now because for the sake of time, I want to make sure that we get through everything. But I'm going to say A times C, just like we've done every single factoring problem. A times C. What is 2 times negative 27? Negative 54. All right. If you didn't know that, you come over here and you say 27 times 2. Boom. Do the math. So I need factors of negative 54 that multiply to give me negative 54, but add to give me negative 3. So you're like, what? Guys, write them out. 1 and 54, right? 2 and what? 27. Does 3 go into 54? Yep. What's 5 plus 4? 9? So 3 goes into 9. So 3 goes into 54 how many times? 18. Good. 4, 5. Does 6 go into 54? 9 times. 7, 8, 9. Okay, we're back again. All right, there's your factors. Guys, of those pairs, what's going to multiply to give me a negative 54, but add to give me a negative 3? 6 and 9, right? That's the only way you could get 3 somehow. So I'm going to have a minus 9 and a positive 6. Why is it minus 9? Because the 3 is we want negative 3. Okay, good. Now I have one more thing I have to do. Since my A term is not 1, I'm going to put the 2 underneath and divide out pretty. Sometimes it doesn't, neither of them divide out pretty. You just have to simplify, which is fine. But does 9 divide by 2? Nope, not nice and pretty. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to say there is my coefficient, 2x minus 9. Does 6 divide by 2? Yeah, what's 6 divided by 2? There you go. Now these are the same. There is no shame, guys, in writing down factors, right? You don't have a calculator, so do the work. Put in the work to make sure you guys can answer these questions. It's important. All right, scooting along. Ooh, our numbers are getting bigger. How annoying, right? But that's okay. A times C. 18 times 8. Off the top of my head, I don't know 18 times 8, so I'm going to come over here and say 18 times 8. What's 8 times 8? 64. Carry the 6. 8 plus 6 is what? 14. Okay. So 144. I need factors of 144 that are going to multiply to give me 144, but add to give me 51. All right. Do we know these off the top of our head? No, but that's okay. We can do a little math over here. So I know my factors are 1 and 144, right? 2 and what? 72. Does 3 go into 144? Does 3 go, what's 4 plus 4? 8 plus 1 is 9. So does 3 go in there? Sure does. Okay, if we don't do that in our head, no big deal. We have paper and stuff we can write on. 3 goes into 14. How many times? 3 times. You guys agree? Okay, so 3 goes into, I meant to put 4, yeah. 3 goes into 24, how many times? 8, all right. So I have 3 and 48. Let's check what we're trying to get again. We're trying to multiply to get 144, but add to get 51. Did I find it? Yeah. What's 3 times 48? Well, we already know it's 144. What's 3 plus 48? 51. So I'm going to say perfect. I have x and x, and I know that it's a positive 3 and a positive 48, correct? Both positive because there's both plus in the in the problem. What do I do now? I have one extra step since my a term is not 1. What do I do? Divide both of my factors by 8. If they divide out pretty, great. If they don't, simplify and move to coefficients. Does 3 divide by 8 nice and pretty? No. So this comes out in front. So I have 8x plus 3. Does 48 divide by 8 nice and pretty? Yep, x plus 6. So now these are the same. Yeah. All right, I said this before when we were doing grouping. What's the problem with number 11? What do I not like? The negative. Let's factor out the -1 right away. We don't like to factor when we lead with a negative. So if I factor out a -1, it doesn't go anywhere. I just have to write it out in front. But what happens to everything in my problem? The signs change. This becomes 6x squared, what? Minus 17x, then what? Minus 3. Good. Factor out the negative first. It does not go anywhere. It's still out in front. It's still a part of your problem. Just get it out of the way. So I'm going to bring my -1 out here, and I'm going to get my 2 binomials set up, put my x's, and I'm going to say a times c. So 6 times -3 is -18. What are the factors of -18 that multiply to give me -18, but add to give me a -17? -18 and +1. Perfect. And then I have one extra step. Since my a term is not 1, I'm going to take that a term and put it underneath both of my factors. Did my -1 go anywhere, guys? No, it's still hanging out in front. It has to be there. What's -18 divided by 6? Okay, so I have x minus 3. 1 divided by 6. Nice and pretty? Nope. So scoot it out front. 6x plus 1. Okay. You guys have a homework right now. It's just a PDF. It's from WebAssign. So if you go and open it, that's what your homework is going to look like going forward after tomorrow. I will get you logged into WebAssign. I'll teach you how to put it into a PDF. We'll talk about all that good stuff. But right now, I just want you, go ahead. You can start working. You have like 15 minutes. You can go ahead and start working on your homework. Sure. We're almost done. Whoops. We are done. Why is that? I don't know how that WebAssign got pulled in there.